of Washington Heights, or of our community board on 160th. By my day job, I work for the United Federation of Teachers, which is the union that represents our public school educators in our school system. And there I do legislation and political action for the union.
Who's next? Aisha?
Hi, my name is Aisha Ogilvy. I've been on the community board for 8 years. I've been on this committee for 8 years. I'm also one of the former chairs of this committee. Yeah.
Thank you, Aisha. Michelle?
Hey guys, I'm Michelle. This is my first year on the community board. I live in the northern part of our community board around 190th. And in my day job, I'm a data engineer at a startup. So work with like databases and like write code. So, yeah.
Cool. Marshall?
I'm Marshall Vanderpool. I'm the first vice president of the Dyckman Resident Association, Dyckman Houses. And I'm a public member of the Housing and Human Services Committee. I guess I've been around, I'm thinking this has got to be my 3rd year. And I don't know, everybody's talking about their day job. I mean, I work for the state tax department. I'm a supervisory collector, and I'll land my plane here.
Thanks, Marshall. Thank you, everyone. So the agenda is relatively short this evening, and unless somebody has wants to make a motion to add some old business or new business. The priority being tonight to go through the budget community priority rankings. And Daryl, I need a check-in here. I forget, do we do a public session now, or do we wait?
Well, I mean, we can ask them, I guess there's just one person.
Oh, okay.
Make it simple, like what it is, if
Yeah,
they're here
that
for
one
anything
person
in particular.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
Tim, do you have something to say, or would like to say, or ask a question? Or we usually give 2 minutes to the public, and then the committee can respond, usually 2 minutes at a time. So you're making it easy because you're the only one tonight.
Really? No, I just joined and I need to catch up today. No, I'll just listen to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Aisha. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say I wanted to add to the agenda the 709 and 705 West 170th Street that I mentioned last month. I do have updates in regards to what's happening in that building. It's my hope that we can get Ebenezer on the October 21st district cabinet meeting to get DOB and HPD at the table to speak to what has been going on in that situation and why things don't seem to be moving along as they should on the city's end.
Okay, we'll do that with old business. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we should just jump right into the budget, because that's the priority on next item on the agenda. And I'm going to share my screen, and I have the budget up here for excuse me, I'm sorry. This was last year's ranking. No, it's FY22. Yeah, okay. These are last year's rankings, and then we have to do next year coming up rankings. Huh.
So I wasn't on the committee. Oh, sorry. Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
please, Angel, go ahead. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm a little confused here.
I wasn't on the committee when we did this last year because I was added to this committee, I think around like January or February. And I know that this typically gets done in the fall. How do these like items get selected? Like, how do we determine if this is what we're going to be voting for?
Well, you see at the top of the screen there where it has our names.
Yeah.
And I'll scroll over. You go through and rank what we decide to include for next year's budget priorities. So you see in the bottom there, FY22 items description, provide funding for long-term affordable housing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the board ranked those priorities in the longer list. Every committee has to do this. They go through different committee priorities and they submit it to the executive committee, and then they all get jumbled together, and every item gets ranked accordingly, and that gets submitted to I guess the Manhattan Borough President's office.
Yeah, no, that I
Like,
understand.
I think,
I get, my question is more specific. How are these 6 determined as the issue items that we are supposed to discuss in this committee?
Oh,
Like,
well,
who gave
we-
those to us? Who came up with them?
we did on the committee last year, and if you want to add something, then we discuss that too and determine whether or not we want to include it in the new rankings that we're going to be doing. And you have the capital investment on the one tab, and then the other tab are expenses, more maintenance kind of items. So, and they sort of overlap. Like funding for food pantries is one of the expense items that the committee ranked number 3 last year. And then number 1 was increased funding for free legal representation in housing court for zip codes not currently covered in CB should be CB12, and increase the eligibility criteria from 200% to 300% of the federal poverty level under the Right to Counsel program. So can you guys all see these? You want me to read through them?
Yeah.
You can all read them?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we can see them.
So if you want to add something, now's the time we can.
Yeah, I think what it's hard to see, at least for me, I'm trying to figure out, like, so the screen you have now,
Yeah.
Is that capital or?
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
right.
capital.
Oh, okay. At the bottom, this is capital now. And
Oh,
then
I see.
at the bottom, the tab, when
Okay.
it's green, it's capital. When it's green,
I
it's
see.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm flipping back and forth. This is what was set up before. And I'll just open it up to the floor. Does anyone want to add anything new this year after you've had a chance to go through and read these? Chanel actually emailed this to everyone on the committee about an hour or so ago.
Mary
I mean,
Ann,
I will,
We're
I
supposed-
just would say
Huh?
that, of the capital items, 3 of them were in the top 10 for the whole board. So that's really good.
Yeah. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So the 3 that you're saying are the funding for permanent long-term affordable housing,
Mhm.
LGBTQ youth supportive housing, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th one, increased funding for housing at risk and transitioning individuals and families,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And then I'm not sure what this new means.
Means it was new last year.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah, some of these
I'm-
hang around for a couple of years. They don't,
Oh, yeah.
they keep going on and on and on until something happens with them.
And I would assume if it was no longer relevant, say it was funded and completed, then it would be taken off or indicated there.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any ideas about new capital priorities that we want to recommend to the board that be moved up the ladder to downtown? Okay. And then likewise, on the expense side, we have increased funding for free legal representation in housing court, which I already described. Tenant support specialists, And
Yep.
fund initiatives to inform and educate tenants of their rights, provide more funding for home-based program to prevent individuals and families at imminent risk from entering the shelter system, increase funding for HPD housing code and DOB building code inspectors, increase funding for supportive housing for LGBTQ youth, provide for the creation of a fund to aid in the upgrading of electrical systems in buildings, and then provide more funding for food pantries. So out of those, the first one was number 2 out of 63. The third one was 5 out of 63. And then the last one, food pantries, was 8 out of 63. Any ideas about adding to that list? I know you haven't had a lot of time to think about it, so.
Yeah.
What, Daryl, what is our ETA on this to submit it to the board? Like you said, next Tuesday or something?
Well, yeah, so Monday's a holiday.
Right.
Yeah, so if we could have it decided by Tuesday,
Okay.
that would be great.
So what you all should do is you go through and you plug in the numbers. So for instance, this is a Google spreadsheet and I can plug in my numbers. No, it's not taking it. You're supposed to be able to plug in. We did this in transportation on Monday and we went through and we plugged in what our rankings were, maybe because there's nothing there. Chanel, can you help me out here?
I think you're in the view only format if you go
I was
to the
just gonna
top.
say.
Okay. Oh, yes, thank you very much. Okay.
So out of curiosity, so since these are the previous budget rankings, do we have the statuses as to what was the outcome of these and whether they have been funded or not? And to what length they've been funded?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think most of those, at least on the committees I served on previously, they're given to Ebenezer and he shares them with the chairs. Usually, I want to say around like April, maybe March. And then it's, read, sometimes the chairs read it out loud. But yeah, it was decided a while ago. But I think, and Chanel can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's still on here, it means that it still needs funding. Like usually the office would change that, is my understanding.
That is definitely not my experience.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so note to self, let's find out an answer to Aisha's question about that.
I mean, let's go with these, I think.
It should actually be in the packet. It's frustrating to be in this position, but I just want to add, right? I get the dynamics that are in play right now, and we're trying to sort out what's going on with you, Daryl, as far, and it kind of, you have to put yourself in a position to recuse yourself in this process, right? Marielle is not available. This is Bruce's first time, and he's new to the committee. But you have someone that's been on the committee for 8 years and chaired this committee for multiple years. Why wouldn't you just ask me? You know what I mean? Because those are some of the things that you would prepare for this process. Just saying.
I hear that. I don't think, I've never really seen, I think presiding over a meeting just for the sake of doing it really has little to do with the input that every other member can bring. So it's certainly not stymieing anyone's input. Now's the time for that, so if there's, things you think we should be looking at, any red flags or any suggestions, that's welcome from everybody. That's not, certainly has nothing to do with who's presiding over the meeting. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I just was only meaning in regards to like knowing where we stand is a part of deciding where we need to go. Right? Like, okay, these things have been funded or not. Um,
I mean, I would ask you, Aisha, and I don't know where, I mean, we're on the Capitol right now. Was there any discussion last year that really stood out in your mind about any of these? Obviously, two of them are new from last year. And in my experience, those new things 9 times out of 10 stay on for the following year. But I mean, was there anything that really stuck out in your mind from any of these that, I don't know, that might resonate with everyone?
I'm going over a document that I have with things that I listed out that were either outstanding or that we should be addressing to see what opportunities I see there. But I like, let's say if we just take, for instance, that one of the new ones, which is to provide funding for the construction of affordable, accessible housing for seniors. So, like, I honestly, I don't specifically know where we stand with that as far as have we had any construction in that area? Do we have any promises for funding for that in that area? How much? How much more do we think we need based on the population that demands it? That kind of thing is things that I would think would be good to know here so that we know what the ask is in a little bit more detail, or whether it's even necessary anymore. I'm pretty sure it probably is, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would say to that point about seniors, and it's interesting to me, you know, again, this is my first time with this committee going through this process. It seems that some of the things are very general or vague. I would think maybe that was intentional. But, you know, as it relates to seniors, we know from the last census that the community is getting older.
Yeah.
A number of, I don't know how maybe you would characterize it, but in general, the average age of residents went up over the last decade.
Yeah. I did a training about assisted living recently that just talked about how the baby boomers are getting to that bracket. And so we're definitely going to see a steep explosion of that population.
I mean, I do know there's the senior center that's being built on 181st Street. I'm sorry, I don't think Richard's here to talk about that. But I can see it from my rooftop that's happening.
Well, do we know who's
Actually, Richard is here. Richard,
oh, is he? Oh, did he come on? Okay.
Is that a specific organization? I wasn't aware.
I think it's ARC. Is it?
Oh, is it really? Oh, that's awesome.
hey, Richard, can you speak to that question?
If you forgive me, it would be helpful to have the question repeated.
So are you seeing the Capitol spreadsheet that we have up on the screen? Okay, so if you go down on the white part, the white lines, rows 1, 2, 3, third one, row number 14 was a new priority brought up last time, provide funding for the construction of affordable, accessible housing for seniors. The question is, what does that mean? And is there anything going on? And why do we want to make that a priority?
And I think Zara was saying that ARC is building a new office on 181st. I wasn't aware.
And I realize I think that might be a senior center,
of,
not housing. I apologize.
Let me try to speak for a couple of things. ARC Senior Services, which I'm connected with, is 40 plus years of serving Washington Heights. What's being built near the corner of what's being rehabbed near the corner of 181st and Audubon is a new facility to move from the senior center that's now at 174th and Broadway, 4111 Broadway. That building, the landlord is putting the space that's a senior center there to other uses. And our senior services leadership is Fern Hertzberg, who's been a community board member over much of the past decade, is the executive director, and that will be the new site for that particular senior center. There's on the other broader question, there's a big need for, seniors are one of the most vulnerable parts of the housing market / affordable housing market in terms of who doesn't have housing, who faces evictions, who has a different income, different needs at that point in life. And that hasn't been constructed in Washington Heights and Inwood. It has been very minimally. There are a couple buildings, and I don't have the list in front of me. The broader issue is both construction of affordable housing for seniors and the question of what preserves seniors in their existing housing. And that certainly overlaps with a pretty wide range of tenants' rights issues that this committee has historically dealt with.
Mhm. Do we have any information about the brackets of what type of affordability that population would need specifically? Because my concern would be, we're just asking for affordable, accessible housing. And I don't know that we could specify that here in this budget. Maybe that would be something for a resolution. But we have to make sure we build housing that would be affordable to the population from our district, so that we're meeting that need and not putting building spaces that then would make it challenging for that constituency to afford to live there. So I'm just curious if we have any information like that. Because, like, for instance, I know of a lot of seniors that live in rooms in people's apartments because they can't afford an apartment. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Do we split
you're
this up?
citing, that's the citing of certainly one very common example. I don't have statistics in front of me tonight. I do think from my own observation of the community board over the last quite a few years that we tend to do the budget resolution in fairly broad terms and then work out the details later, whether it's working it out with a nonprofit affordable housing developer, whether it's, it seems to me as a perfectly reasonable thing for this committee to do further investigation on, or further learning on, because the data is out there, whether I have it with me or not tonight. Very good topic for future discussion. But I think these are the kind of broad categories that we usually do in our budget ranking resolution and rankings.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I think similarly to the LGBT supportive housing, I know I just read that they're building what they call the first suburban LGBT housing, which will be on Long Island. I think they just broke ground or just announced it. But in the city, I think there was something in Lower Harlem that they're looking to build. But in general, these are relatively some of the first housing, supportive housing for LGBT youth in the city.
SAGE, a major LGBT senior serving organization, has developed a facility that's open in Brooklyn, senior apartments. And I'm not sure whether the facility they were working on near Crotona Park in Bronx is open at this point. If it isn't, it's well under construction. I saw a recent notice of a facility targeted to homeless LGBT youth being developed in East Harlem. I don't have enough information on that to speak intelligently about it.
You did bring.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Aisha.
No, I just was going to say I kind of feel the same way in general in regardless to the situation with homelessness. We had a meeting, I believe it was last year, it may have been the first year of the pandemic, in regards to the spike of homelessness. That probably a lot of it is stemming from the pandemic. I'm in school right now, so I haven't been doing as much research as I normally would be doing, but I'm interested to know where we stand now at this point, especially having, gotten this far into the pandemic. What's the status of the homeless population that was on the rise when we last had a meeting about it? We had several representatives, and I think you might have been here, Bruce, when we had several representatives from different offices dealing with various aspects of homelessness. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, I actually asked them based on advocacy and things that I see on the ground, is that, a lot of these entities operate in silos. And so like one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And then sometimes the client that they're serving falls through the cracks because of the conflicts between the agencies. And they definitely said something needs to be done about that. I don't know what we could be suggesting to kind of infer that they need to be fixing that problem and talking to each other better, and so that there's more of a safety net for clients. But knowing where we are with that population and how it breaks down demographically would be good.
So I think to your point, Aisha, on the expense side, provide more funding for the home-based program to prevent individuals from entering the shelter system. It looks like the expenses categories are existing ongoing programs, although I see increased funding for supportive housing for LGBT youth. It doesn't mention a specific program, but the home-based program already exists. So this has to do with giving them more money versus the capital, which is broader, like Richard was saying, to initiate, I don't know. It's a little tricky how they separate how
the housing at risk and transitioning into individual families.
Yeah, how the capital programs differentiate from the expenses. Expenses is usually something that's maintenance goes to continuing and
like
fixing.
Programs and services.
Yeah, fixing, and capital is something where you invest into an asset, something new, to make it more valuable,
Yeah, like infrastructure.
Infrastructure example, yeah. So.
I mean, I do like the, prioritizing the home base funding program, but yeah, maybe like for another meeting, it would be interesting to know how that is working, first of all. And second of all, I feel like, with the onset of the pandemic over a year and a half ago, what is the homelessness situation in terms of, is it people that are, housed in their own private housing and then lose that somehow? Is it, is there another avenue in which people are finding themselves in that situation that maybe this program wouldn't help? I'm just curious, if the problem has changed at all with the pandemic and how that's changed.
I would imagine that it's exacerbated. My knowledge of it is that it's a layered situation. Some of the homeless population, unfortunately, are people that have been homeless as much as 6-7 years in living in shelters. I know one such family that I helped get out of a domestic violence situation to move into the shelter. They now have been in the shelter for about 3 to 4 years, with no real hope of getting out because the voucher that they received does not meet the base rent. that are existing in order for them to find an apartment, which is also a major part of the problem. And then, you know, people not being able to pay their rent in this pandemic is a whole other ballgame. So yeah, there's a spectrum of why. But I wonder what the percentages are for that, for your question. It's a good question.
Sorry. So back to the objective, which is we don't have a lot of time to rank these, and individually we'll go in and go down the list and then collect them and aggregate the data so that we come up with a committee ranking.
And can I ask just, I'm just thinking logistically, if you go up to the yellow part where it says item number,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm not certain about is what is the item number below? Do you know what I'm saying? So
What
if we're
does the item
saying increase funding for free legal representation, is that one? I mean, are we going off the rankings from last year, or are we going by the order that's listed?
I'm going to defer to Aisha on this because she's done it a lot more times than I have.
I think item number is generally the number that the city assigns it, like that long digit number.
No, I don't think
Oh,
that's
but-
what it means. I mean, that's just, it's like, so line 12 through, I don't know, what is it? That one. Is that just, can we call that one? And then 2, 3, 4 on down?
Oh,
So
you just mean the general organization of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's however we rank it, based
Yeah,
on how we
you're-
rank it. That's the number system that we would allot to it, so
Right,
that
we
when
have
it goes to the
1,
board, then
2,
they
3,
know
4,
what our
5, 6, 7.
preferences are.
We have to give it a number because we can't rank it if it doesn't have a number.
Right. That's
So
why, yeah.
I can't. I have to request edit access, but Chanel can plug in these numbers for us, and then we can rank them.
Yeah, it just
accordingly.
makes sense to put it 1 through 7, I think, in this case.
Yeah.
Oh,
In the other
yeah.
case, 1 through 6.
Anyway, so can you do that for us, Chanel?
Actually, I think that was Marielle that sent that. So I
Oh,
think she
okay.
has the.
I'm sorry.
probably why.
It's okay.
My bad. Marielle did this. Okay.
You can copy it over to your own spreadsheet.
But it'll be basically re-emailed out to everyone with numbers on the side, so we
Yeah.
know what we're talking about.
Okay, good.
And then
Same
everyone will
for both
put
of them.
what they think the ranking should be.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1 through 7 on the expense side. And then you go up
Yeah.
and stick your rankings here. And we're going to keep it general at this point, and then try to work through some of these issues, I guess, the rest of the year. I mean, it sort of sets an agenda for upcoming meetings. I remember we had last year some shelter people come in and talk about some of the projects. The Bowery shelter folks came in and talked about the project up in Inwood. Remember that, Aisha?
Yeah,
So some of these
Yeah.
are a work in sorry.
yeah, that was an impressive presentation that they gave.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know what's happened to them since then. Maybe, we want to invite
an
them
update.
back again when,
I think that was part of the plan when we met with them. I think there were some things that we had questions on that we were
Yeah.
supposed to funnel back to.
well, they were still trying to get their ducks in a row, as I recall. I'm not sure how far along they were into it, other than they had a major plan that was going to go forward, but it had certain conditions that had to be met. And
Yeah, part of
I
that
don't-
was one of the sites on 155th Street. if I
Oh,
remember.
that's right. They also had the cemetery there, or the graveyard that they had to work with.
Yeah, the memorialization. of that,
Memorialization, right. Yeah,
the
so,
slave graveyard.
hi, okay.
And
So
yeah,
I guess,
I like how we, keep these general, and a lot of these can be maybe worked out, obviously through the rezoning. There's the other building on, was it Nagel and Broadway? That maybe some of this can be worked into or negotiated at some point.
So, there was a practice that actually came down from Richard Lewis, for me at least, of whatever like the current most important relevant news to the committee, he would provide it at the beginning of the meeting so that the committee's aware of the dynamics that we have purview over. And that's a practice that I continued after him. I only bring that up to say, because we started talking about the rent programs and, how people are affected by that. And one of the things that just happened, and I'm trying to find in my phone where I bookmarked it, but one of the heads of the rent program stepped down. And I know that there's been a lot of issues in that area where tenants who are eligible and maybe have applied, that money seemingly is not getting to them for whatever reason. So maybe there's an opportunity there to figure out, well, what is it that's happening, and have an understanding of how that's impacted people in our district. How many people have that as an outstanding matter, or are on the brink of eviction, or that kind of dynamic, and are being affected by that. But I really think something needs to be done about. I know that the vouchers were increased. The amount for the vouchers were increased a certain amount. I gotta check my text because I definitely sent it to a couple of people that I advocate for. So I
Yeah,
can
so back in June.
Yeah, do you know
Yeah.
about that, Angel?
Yeah, so back in June, it's been put on par with Section 8 now. So it was increased so that it matches what the federal standards were, or sorry, the federal standards are.
Do you know what the new amount max is?
I can look it up real quick. I was actually just reading that email because we did some advocacy work on that at the union for that.
so Richard, do you have a question? Or
I'll let Angel
comment?
finish and it'll
Yeah.
give you a sense of what fits.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Angel, if you know, how much is that actually helping us to get closer to getting people into actual apartments? I know that it's raised, but if we compare that to what the median rents are, how hopeful are we that it's going to make people, or give people more of an opportunity to get apartments? Because if it's still low, maybe then that's something that we want to be asking for.
Yep. And I believe the legislation looked to peg increases as well, so that it doesn't just stay at a specific level, but it would actually be done based on what the fair market rent rate established by the federal government, established by HUD, would be.
But what did you call it, PEG?
So it's called, the program itself is called City FEPS.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm trying to see.
What's the name of the program?
So it's the city's rental assistance program. It's called City FEPS. So it's city, then capital FHEPS.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And what we did was that in June, there was a piece of legislation that was passed that raised it to match the federal Section 8 fair market rent levels. So we were like significantly below what Section 8 vouchers were. And we increased that. I'm trying to get to the
Was that state or city?
city. So it's a city voucher program.
And it's interesting, too, as far as the agency I work for, the Commission on Human Rights, is concerned, they often deal with what we call source of income discrimination, which is if someone has a voucher of any sort and a landlord doesn't take it, or they require special hoops to go through, or funding that people need to have other than the voucher in order to attain that apartment. That's something that I know 3 years ago was like 60% of the cases that we had. So I know it's something the agency was definitely going after, to the point where they could freeze an apartment until the issue is resolved with the landlord, which was an incentive.
Okay, so Richard, are you ready?
Yeah, I'd like to ask of the chair and the committee that we do consider doing two things at this point. One, move as quickly as possible towards completing this committee's budget rankings, which is the agenda item in front of us. In the other discussions that we're having, I hear a lot of really thoughtful comments about things we need more information on. But let's just take a little bit of time and make a list of what we need to be able to do our work over the next 2, 3, 4 months. But let's move on this item as quickly as we can.
Okay, do I hear that? I hear that as a motion. Do I hear a second?
I think the chair has the power to move on that. It isn't really.
And I'm sorry, Richard, you missed the beginning of the meeting. Bruce is presiding over this meeting, not me.
Excuse me. I think that the person presiding over the meeting has the room to make that decision.
Okay.
Motion.
So we'll move on this and follow up with the details that we've discussed, and go to unless anybody has any objection, we'll go to the next agenda item, which is old business. And Aisha had a topic about 709 and 705 West 170th Street, and I'll give her the floor.
Bruce, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just before we move on, just to clarify. So we're all going to be emailed a new spreadsheet with the numbers. We're all going to rank it individually and send them back to Chanel, Bruce, and Miriam. Is that, or just Chanel and she'll send it to all of us and tabulate it? Is she still on? Oh, there she is.
I don't know. So
Sorry.
Chanel sent it to Marielle and myself, and we'll go over it with you. You there, Chanel?
Yeah, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
How do the committees usually do it? Do they just send it to you, or what do they do?
Yeah, they send it to me with their rankings.
Okay.
And just also for the new people, like if we were in person, this would look differently. We would be doing it on a whiteboard and all this stuff, but we don't have the capability of doing that here.
Did you want me to give the numbers, or I'm okay with moving on? I just found them if people were interested in terms of the vouchers.
Point of information, if we think of something that could be added to this, can we do that? Is there like a deadline that we can do that by, so that it can be ranked by another deadline, or is this the last opportunity for that?
I think it's our last opportunity because this has to be in by Tuesday. But if you have a real burning desire to add something, just send it to the committee. And we're not allowed to do, let me just say this, we were told on Monday, we're supposed to do this in one session. And Jim Berlin was on that committee, transportation.
Yeah.
And he said, we're supposed to do this live. We're supposed to get it done in this
True.
meeting.
Yeah. That's
And
true.
then, but what Jim said, because we had a couple of questions about some things, and a few people, anyway, he said you can not adjourn the meeting till the next day, and we had until 5 o'clock on Tuesday to submit our ranking votes. And then Debbie wrapped it up and sent it along. So
Oh,
I
it's
guess-
my first knowledge of that. Adjourning, holding the adjournment. For
Open.
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jim,
Somewhere in Robert's rules.
yeah. So that's what we did in transportation on Monday, and we waited for whatever reasons, I forget exactly now, until Tuesday at 5 o'clock when that was the deadline and everybody got their votes in. And if you want to do something like that, I guess we could consider it, or get this done and then bring it up at the next meeting to discuss.
Okay.
Are you okay with that, Aisha?
Yeah.
And then we can move along to the next agenda item. Any objections? Aisha?
No.
Okay,
And I'm also, would committee members that are not present have that opportunity, if we did that as well, since they're not here?
yeah, once we get this, that's a good point. Once we get this, the numbering and all that, Chanel will send it out to everybody. And we'll tell them to have it in by tomorrow night, Friday night. See what happens. If somebody doesn't make it, they don't make it. But ultimately, this goes to the, I guess, the executive committee next Tuesday. Isn't that your understanding, Daryl?
I think the executive committee is the following Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm not sure of these deadlines. I'm just,
I think we wanted to have the all of our votes in on the rankings by Tuesday. Yeah.
well, then let's just say that. We'll give everybody until Tuesday. And if for some reason you can't do it today or tomorrow, get it to us by Tuesday. Is that okay, Chanel? I guess she's not there. Okay. We'll figure it out. Let's move along to old business, and Aisha, you're up.
Yeah, I'm actively creating one album, which should be done in about 5 seconds. To be able to share my screen so that you could see some of the conditions that I'm speaking of. Okay.
And while we're waiting, I think someone else from the public came in. I was just wondering if there was anything specific they wanted to discuss, or they wanted to wait, just observing, or.
Okay.
Marielle, would you like to say anything?
Hi, Maria.
No, I don't think that's our Marielle.
No, it's a different
Oh, it's
Marielle.
not?
I don't see a last name. I'm just seeing Mariel.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. I wasn't sure. So this is, I don't know if you could see my mouse, but on the left you have 709 West 175th Street, and then right here in the middle is 705 West 175th Street. The current situation there is they have a landlord that seemingly is established in California. I did some research and I learned that they work out of a co-working virtual space, so not even a brick and mortar location. Seemingly they had a lawsuit that was filed against them in recent years by former superintendents. The superintendents won that lawsuit, and I think they won approximately $30,000 thereabouts. which may lend to why they don't have a super now. Not to say that they shouldn't have hired a new one, but I don't know what all the dynamics are, but clearly there's not a super at this moment. The effect that is having is that these are the conditions that the tenants there find themselves dealing with on a very regular basis, just complete disregard. Now, this is today. This is actually better, and this is probably because since these conversations have been being had, they have been filing complaints. I have talked to them about organizing meetings, which they had been having loosely. I created a Facebook for them to be able, you could see obviously there's rats running around in there. This was a notice stating that they've assigned a new super to the building, but as you can see, it's dialer cleaner. But dialer cleaner wasn't really showing up either. This is in the interior of the building. This is the building next door, 705. This wood board that you see on the floor there is covering up the septic for the building is overflowing, and somehow, you know, in some type of disrepair, you could smell it from the sidewalk. Not a good situation. But also, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but for a while, there's been no lights there. So when people go and they're supposed to be able to throw their garbage away, this is what they have to enter in order to do so, right? This is, the door is broken, so it's also a safety issue as far as people being able to come and go. Actually, they got stuck in the building at one point. They were locked inside the building, and that's part of the reason why I think the fire department may have broken it in order to give them relief in getting out of the building. So I went into some of the apartments and then they were showing me how rats are running around and behind the building. There's major holes inside their apartments where rats can come into the apartment. They have glue traps all throughout their apartments for that reason, so that they can, you know, catch these vermin as they come into the apartment. Definitely
what this has to do with.
mold, mildew, cracks, etc. But
I guess
so
it is about environment.
so the bottom line is this landlord is completely absent and subjecting all the tenants in both of these buildings to major issues that are health and safety issues. There's also squatters in the building, homeless people that have gone as far as defecating in the stairwell of the building, and the tenants have had to clean the stairwell so that it's not you know, creating a nuisance. So the big question here is HPD is aware of this issue. DOB came onto the scene earlier on in September because bricks were falling off of the roof. We had a situation in our district earlier on, maybe just a couple months ago, where bricks fell and hit a man in the head and he ended up being hospitalized. So it's a very dangerous situation. Unfortunately, when DOB showed up, I informed them of all the things that I was aware of that were concerns, and that not just concerns in general, but that would fall in DOB purview. The position that the agency takes apparently is if they're called for one specific thing, they're not allowed to even entertain anything else, which is concerning, because if the other thing that I'm telling you about is a major concern that could harm someone in this moment, why wouldn't you want to document that when you're on the scene? So I think this gives us the opportunity to be able to look at what the practices are, make suggestions about changes of how they could be more accountable to our community, and definitely be responsive to things that are urgent and necessary for the tenants in our district. Oh, they also had installed cameras. Someone stole the camera just within the last week. Interestingly enough, they stole the camera piece but left the rest of the equipment. So I kind of feel like if your intention was to steal it for the sake of its value, wouldn't you take the whole thing? And they said that, you know, whoever did it was very crafty about making sure that they they couldn't be seen when they did it. So they don't really know exactly who's responsible for stealing the camera, but they're going to replace it. They actually are making investments on their own into the building because, you know, they live there and they want to live in a certain type of environment, but they can't really afford to do it all. And clearly this is the landlord's responsibility. So it's my thought to put this in Ebenezer's lap. I've spoken to the tenants about getting specific detail about how they're affected in each of their apartments, what the safety and health violations are that they're experiencing, so that we could kind of compare that to what HPD is or is not doing, what is accounted for on their website, and then get them to move into action, because the city has a responsibility. This has been going on for a while. They've been aware of it for a while. And there should have been a clock on the landlord already. And for whatever reason, that's not being triggered in this situation. So.
Whoa, thank you, Aisha. And Ebenezer will what, contact HPD or?
So on the 21st is the district cabinet meeting. And at the district cabinet meeting, he can kind of call them to task on this situation, find out what has or has not been done, what needs to be done, and get them to work together to address the needs of these tenants so that they could be in a building that's habitable and safe.
What other recourse do we have, or does the community board have, besides Ebenezer appealing to HPD?
Well, I think aside from the specifics of these two buildings, what we're seeing is a window into the broader dynamics for our district where repairs are concerned. It's something that definitely was on the agenda a few years ago. It's something that when I was chair, we were working towards being able to have meetings about how DOB and HPD works and what kind of changes need to be happening there. And I actually I sat with Microsoft. I don't know, some of you may know I went to school to become a web developer. And so I had an idea of how we can be more responsive to the people in our district if we had a certain type of platform where tenants in the building or a tenant organizer, building representative can be able to self-report information into a system that the community board will also have insight into, but that also whenever information that we have comes about, we can also push it out to those representatives in those buildings. Because one of the things that I had seen when I first started was we had black water flood into many of the people in our district's tubs and sinks. I was one of them. Just 2 blocks away from me, there was a woman who she was putting together the formula for her baby, and she didn't know that the water was black. And so she mixed it with the formula only to find later that this is what the situation was, and she gave that to her baby. Not a good situation. But from the community board side, we knew there was a water main break. This is what it can create. If we had a system that we can push all that information out into our district and say, don't drink the water, wait for further information, here's where you can learn more, then that's something that could benefit the people in our district. Unfortunately, that effort, Microsoft actually agreed to compensation waived, start to figure out how to map out the platform that I had the idea for. And unfortunately, that got swallowed by the effort that I was pushing where the Armory is concerned, and then I got removed from my position as chair of IT. I got removed from my position as chair of housing, and we don't have that system. I still think that that's a system that would be beneficial to our district because of this type of situation. There are a lot of people that are living in situations that the building is in disrepair, where the city is not being responsible, and then we don't even know about it. The building that Carrot Top is in had no gas for many years. Now we changed the street sign in memory of Renee Mancino, but we didn't know that the very building that her business was in had no gas for over a year, and the people that are tenants in that building had no gas. We didn't know. For whatever reason, HPD and DOB didn't do anything to change that circumstance, and her business ended up getting shut down with the street sign named after her in front of it. Those are the kind of things that the technology that exists in 2021 can definitely circumvent that and kind of give us the opportunity to move more expeditiously on behalf of the members of our district.
I don't know how long I'm gonna stay with this stuff.
So,
That's a big,
I think, Tim, you might be not muted. But Aisha, it was interesting. I was looking up while you were talking about that building, and they do have one class 1 violation against them, it looks like, which is mainly for structural reasons. And there was a fine of over $6,000.
Is that a new one? That may be the situation with the bricks falling off of the roof.
Yeah, I think that was the newest one.
Yeah.
But there aren't many other complaints. I don't know. I'm not sure how many residents are in the building you mentioned, but the more complaints, the better. I know it takes a while and people get frustrated. But as of now in the system, it's not logged in.
So I do know for a fact I'm in a chat with some of the residents, and so they update me whenever they do make complaints. I think something that could be happening here is these are small buildings, so they don't have very many apartments. It's a 5-floor walk up in both cases, with probably 3 apartments on each floor. So in the scheme of things, where you may have a building that's like mine that has something like 80 apartments, this maybe doesn't look like a major problem because it's just this small amount of tenants, but for them, this is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Aisha, let me ask you a question. Do they call 311
Yes.
when they have problems, and is 311 directing those calls to HPD, and is HPD doing anything other than they sent that one guy out about the camera, right? That's what you're saying?
No one came out about the camera specifically. Someone came out, I'm trying to remember, I just spoke to them. I don't remember exactly what the situation was that they just came out for, but they've been to the building multiple times. And this is the kind of thing that after a month, the city is generally supposed to move in and fix the problem and find the landlord. Why that hasn't happened, I'm not completely sure. The suggestion I've been making to these tenants is there are buildings that have been taken over by the tenants, right? Where it turns into a co-op, and they share ownership in it, and they push the landlord out because obviously this is negligence on the part of the landlord. Oh, the thing that I definitely need to include here is that the landlord has also been asking the tenants for their routing information to their bank so that they can somehow take the rent out of their bank accounts. But yet this is the level of irresponsibility that the landlord exhibits. So there's definitely something awry here as far as the management of this building. I know that management has also changed hands a couple of times over the last few years, but this is outrageous at this point.
Do you know of
Is
any
that
other?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, I was just going to say, is this Adonis's district, or is this?
It is.
Has his office been involved?
No, you bring up a good point. Not to my knowledge, you bring up a good point, and maybe that's something that I'll suggest to the tenants to do.
Yeah, I would suggest them, and maybe even the public advocate's office.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Well, thank. Anything else, Aisha, with that?
No.
Any idea how many other buildings are like this?
So I do know that reports that I've seen in the past state that we have underreporting, but even with the reporting that we do have, we have buildings that are falling into disrepair for various reasons. And the city doesn't have the wherewithal, which is part of the reason why in our budget rankings, we have consistently asked for more funding, for more inspectors, because we need more responsiveness to this. One of the suggestions that I have made in the past is dual certification when repairs are being done, because maybe that could free up inspectors from having to do certain types of follow-up. Because if I have an account as a tenant in the city's website and I call and I say, you know, my sink is broken, my landlord needs to fix it, and the landlord comes and fixes it to my satisfaction, I can go in and say, yeah, the work is done, here's a picture of it, I'm good, right? Now the inspector doesn't have to come back out or follow up with me in any regard, because I've already done that work for them. So that's the type of suggestion that I would have to try to, you know, create some type of balance here, but we definitely need some remedy.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Any questions for her or any comments from anyone?
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
So maybe at this point, we'll ask Tim and Marielle, our two attendees, if they have any questions, comments, and jump right in, Tim or Marielle. And if not, we'll keep on going.
I
Okay.
did have an update, Bruce, from our last meeting and the my conversation with the executive committee, and if that's okay to mention right now. Or you're muted.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, basically, and Aisha, I think this speaks to your question. I'm sorry there wasn't more of an answer, but just in terms of asking about the hearing on the armory that our chair was looking into. Unfortunately, the chair wasn't at the last executive committee meeting, so we didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Okay.
But I did make it known, and people are aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other old business? Going once, going twice? Okay. New business. Anybody like to propose something new? Maybe what Aisha was just talking about, bringing up this database that she's been working on in the past and trying to do something about it.
So, yeah, I've considered revisiting with one of the partners that was involved in that effort with Microsoft, to see the possibilities of that. I don't know what the possibility would be at this point. Unfortunately, at that point, it was going to be free. And honestly, for someone that had just left school to become a web developer, to land that kind of opportunity with one of the international major technology companies was major, but the value wasn't seen on this board for whatever reason. But I think it's definitely worth the effort to do that. So thank you for that, Bruce.
You're welcome.
I wanted to point out in the New York Times, there's an article called "Why $46 Billion Couldn't Prevent an Eviction Crisis," and it kind of proposes to break down some of the pitfalls that took place with that money. Maybe this could give us some insight into what needs to be happening, because I fear, with the amount of people that have been impacted by the pandemic in various ways, and the courts now removing the moratorium on evictions, and people just not even being aware. I've had many people come to me to say, listen, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. The unemployment has now stopped. And, you know, do you know of anything that I could do? Now, I knew about the ERAP program and I sent that to them, but why isn't that being made known to people? Maybe we need something where it makes the landlord responsible to inform tenants when they are falling into arrears, that these are possibilities, because it shouldn't be like I just didn't know, and then we got people who get evicted and they just could have applied for a program.
Richard, did you have your
So-
hand up? Go right ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, the group that I've come across that is most knowledgeable about ERAP and the related issues is Palante, which is Harlem-based, but which certainly connects with Washington Heights and Inwood quite a bit. Perhaps it'd make sense to invite someone from Palante to be at our upcoming next committee meeting. We can certainly publicize that information is going to be at the committee meeting and use that as a bridge to people to get people more informed. Just as an aside, the senior center where I work, we have Palante coming on a program this month. They are willing to help people with both providing information and help with filling out forms. They're wildly busy right now, as you might expect, but this sounds to me like something that could be scheduled.
That's a good idea. Thank you. We'll put that on the to-do list. Any other comments about anything we've been discussing? Richard?
Should I just put Palante's phone number in the chat right now as so the way to get it out?
Sure, for anybody who wants to call them, and I know people there, we can connect, but go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
this will also be my way of sharing it with
Yeah,
committee
thank you.
leaders.
Thank you.
Palante does great
I don't
work.
think we have the chat function.
We don't?
Oh, no.
No.
How about if I just say it?
Well, you want to say it? Go ahead.
It's old fashioned, but I can try. Palante, which is the initials PALANTE. Their phone number is 212-491-2541.
Who do you contact there? I know different people do different things.
I'm
person
aware of two staffers there, and I'm blanking on the name of the executive director, but I will have it within 5 minutes for you. There is a staff person, I think his title is program director, and his name is Jakari Green, with an E on the end of Green. Give me a minute and I'll come up with the executive director's name.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask, since we've had some changes, can an email be sent out with all of the committee members' email on it, so that way I can send out details about, any updates or articles or anything that I find to the committee? I just don't know, like, really who's on, who's off right now.
Chanel, can you do that for us? You there?
Yeah, I can forward you the directory.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up maybe taking a look at any updates of the RAD program. I know that that's something that's impacting some of the developments, NYCHA developments and senior housing developments up here. We had them come in when I first joined, I want to say February or January or February, but just to get a general update on how the renovations have been going, that would be interesting to hear about. And then thinking about—
Sorry, which program was that?
It's called the RAD program, RAD. It's a program that the city initiated where basically they were going to start forking over the management of our public housing to the private sector. And the idea is that there would be built-in incentives to actually be able to maintain the housing and the housing stock. Just because, as we all know, NYCHA has fallen so far behind in terms of being able to maintain housing stock.
Yeah,
So that's one. And then something else that came to mind related to housing is, I mean, during the pandemic, I think we came to learn about the hundreds of thousands of households that just did not have access to broadband internet. Maybe check in on see what the developments have been there, specifically households with students in them. Just two ideas that popped to mind.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm just curious what's going to happen in January with the new administration in City Hall. You know, who are going to be the players at HPD and commissioners, and
Yeah.
things
I
are
actually, I
going to,
wanted to bring that up because
next year is going to be wild.
if it's anything, you know, like my agency, I do know people are leaving or have left already.
Really?
It's, I mean, my agency, we've had about 10% leave just recently. So I think a lot of other agencies are feeling the same, most likely.
Are they feeling that they're not going to fit into the new administration, or are they getting any?
Well, a lot of folks are like political appointees, so to speak, or just higher up. Like our commissioner just left on Friday, and certainly, you know, those positions will certainly see turnover. So I unfortunately I don't know how focused they are on you know, the task at hand in these last couple months.
Because we're going to have a new city council in both districts, Carmen De La Rosa and Shauna Brew, and Mark's going downtown to replace Gail as borough president. So it's going to be an interesting year, as I said. Okay, anything else? I don't want to drag this out. It's almost 8:30, and go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, the executive director of Palante is Elsia, Elsia Vasquez, VAS, as our other Vasquez is tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's dynamite. Okay,
Yeah.
in a good way. I'm like a rock star. So we'll reach out to her and see what we can do as far as maybe getting them involved in an upcoming meeting. Anybody else? Michelle, you want to jump in with any kind of question? You're new to the committee. You've got to unmute. Uh-oh, can't hear you, Michelle.
Looks like it's unmuted, but
Yeah, you look like you're unmuted. We just can't hear you. Or is it just me?
no, it's not just.
It's us.
All right, we'll let you off the hook this time. Okay, anybody have anything else to say? And then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
How did it go at your transportation meeting? Do we officially adjourn or do we just leave?
Oh, yeah.
Adjourning.
Let's just leave and say that everybody get their votes in by Tuesday, and that'll be the end of it. 5 o'clock on Tuesday. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
Until
Thank
next
you all
time.
very much. And
Thank you, Bruce.
I have to admit, being on this end of it is a lot harder than just sitting and listening. As many meetings as I've been in, you really have to think. So I admire all the chair people, Daryl and Aisha and others who've been chairs, and I hope Marielle's back next time. Okay, you all have a good night. Thank you very much.
Great meeting.
Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
All right, good night, everybody.
Have a good weekend.